Well, I know we're probably going to be talking about Captain Marvel for a very long time, but before we get to the main topic of today's show, I think it's hard to really get into everything without first talking about again, breaking news. Every single time I record, there's big news. Disney has officially announced Galaxy's Edge opening dates at both Disneyland and Walt Disney World. So I guess my question to both guests are, do you have your tickets already?
I was like, I don't. I am terrified of the crowds. So unless I end up at Disneyland for the expo this year, I don't know when I'm going to get there.
We obviously have tickets because we're annual pass holders, but we don't know if we're going to go for the opening weekend. We've looked into some hotel accommodations to see if that would make it easier, but we're also terrified of the crowds and afraid that would just make it a bad experience as opposed to being able to really enjoy it.
Yeah, I know it's going to be crowded for a while, and I can handle, moderate crowd. I expect it to be long lines, but yeah, opening weekends, I typically, unless I'm going to a screening, I don't even see a new movie the opening weekend for the same reason.
No, I agree. I used to go to midnight premieres of movies all the time when that was still a thing. Now they kind of premiere them at more like 7 p.m., so that doesn't really have the major crowds. But midnight premieres of movies, I remember going to one and people were just like screaming during the movie. Like at every scene they were screaming and cheering, and I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not getting the experience I wanted out of it by being with this many people.
Well, the good news is Star Wars isn't that well known of a property. I don't think it should be too bad.
I will say, as someone who lived in Orlando when Hogsmeade first opened at Harry Potter, that is wrong. I can't even explain what that was like. I remember all of the news stories. It was on local news. Local news was showing with helicopters flying over the crazy line of people all the way outside of the Universal Park, going from as far back as you can imagine on City Walk. And I am a huge Harry Potter fan, even more of a fan of Harry Potter than I am of Star Wars. And I wanted to go so badly, but I was like, I want to experience it in a way that's not going to make me miserable. And so I actually didn't go to Harry Potter, even though I've been excited about it for years. For the first time, from the moment they announced it, I was excited. But I didn't go for probably like 6 to 8 months after they opened it because I just didn't want to deal with that kind of crowds.
Oh, can I just totally nerd out about something that's completely off topic?
Absolutely.
Since you brought up Universal. I still remember one of the coolest things I have ever done professionally was I was on like a self-funded vacation to Orlando, but I contacted Universal and said, hey, can I get some press tickets maybe? And not only did they give me tickets, it was right after Escape from Gringotts had opened, and I got a secret tour through the back and got to jump the line when the line was like 4 hours long.
Oh, that's awesome.
Coolest thing ever.
Yeah, that's so cool.
That is a straight up superpower.
It was hard to not feel like I was somebody,
Yeah, exactly.
Like after that and you had to go stand in regular lines and everything, it was very crushing. But for that moment, I was like, this is like amazing. I never want to go back to normal life ever.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool.
Well, it's funny you say that. Earlier today, Kaitlin and I were actually at Universal Orlando, and we went to both Islands of Adventure and Universal Studios. So we saw all the Harry Potter stuff today, and we were in Diagon Alley, and honestly, it was kind of quote-unquote chill. Like, it really wasn't that busy because it's, I don't know, winter, I guess, in Orlando. It was still 82 degrees, but I'm going to call it winter. But the crowds weren't that bad, and Gringotts was at like a 45-minute wait, and I was talking to one of our friends, and I went, I remember when this opened, and like you said, Amy, 4 hours. So what I told him was, I really hope that maybe years from now, Batu and Galaxy's Edge will be but a mere hangout spot for us,
Well, yeah, when I went to Hogsmeade for the first time, when that side of it opened, and that was the first part of the Harry Potter lands at Universal, and I went 8 months after, there were still lines just to go in the shops, and not even just for the Ollivanders experience. There were lines to go into the candy store and lines to go into the joke shop, and you couldn't really do anything in there, even though it was a little better. You could get in without standing in a line. Like, you could get into the land, but to go into the shops and to go into the restaurant and to do any of that stuff, there were still lines even 8 months later. So I'm sure that's what we'll experience here. But now when we go, it's relatively calm. Like you can walk into the stores. We went into a store today and just kind of walked around, and there wasn't a whole lot of crowd in there, and we didn't have to wait in a line. So it does fix itself eventually.
Yeah, those memes that came out about a week ago. So, I mean, for those of you at home that don't know, Walt Disney World and Disneyland finally announced the opening dates for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is May 31st for Disneyland and August 29th for Walt Disney World. But as soon as those dates were announced, memes across the internet, not just in Disney communities, but just like, I don't know, I saw it on Facebook with family members started posting about it, showing like it was a picture of the concept art for Galaxy's Edge, and then right underneath it, it said what Galaxy's Edge will actually look like, and it showed a sea of people. And I think that Disney obviously doesn't like that. I say obviously, but I've heard that a lot of people go, oh, well, Disney loves a good line, and they sure want the press of saying, look how popular Galaxy's Edge is. I don't think so. I think Disney looks at that and goes, no, we don't want you to delay your vacation. We want you to come ASAP, like August 29th, be in Orlando. So I'm very curious to see how the next few months roll out because, man, there are so many questions that I still have. Even though they've given us a lot of data, man, we are but mere months away from this thing, and there's still so many things that I'm curious about.
Yeah, I saw my favorite meme I saw was one. It was the Welcome to Florida sign, and then it said Galaxy's Edge line starts here. Yeah, I kind of think. I mean, obviously the parks are loving the buzz, but they don't. But yeah, their primary goal is to have people to have an amazing experience, so they come back. So I think I'm sure that they have a plan in place to make sure that people aren't too miserable waiting for everything, but we'll see.
Yeah, because when it comes, like, I just think the closest thing to keep comparing it to is Universal with Harry Potter. And as much as I think on the day that it happened, Universal loved seeing that many people lined up to give them money, I don't think that they actually love that those photos exist from a press standpoint, like of the lines being that long. I don't think they love that that exists as much as maybe in the moment they were like, oh my God, thank God people want to give us all of their money and come in here.
Well, I mean, as locals, we saw photos like that and immediately went, I'm staying home. No, thank you. So I can imagine what it's like for people from elsewhere in the country. But either way, it is extremely exciting. Like the details that have been released as of late have been super, like, I don't know. We even started talking about trying to find time to go on opening day because, man, these attractions sound absolutely cuckoo banana crackers. But to avoid spending too much time on this is not a Star Wars Galaxy's Edge episode, as much as I wish it would be. We actually have, I would say, an even more exciting conversation on the docket today. Well, sup nerds, this is your average Diz nerd, host Danny Bogue. This week is a very special episode because I have two guests, as you can already tell. First up, she's been on the show before. You're actually in contention with Corey Disbrow now for most guestings on this show. My girlfriend, Kaitlin. Kaitlin, how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here, especially because we're talking about Captain Marvel, which I told you the day that you said you were going to start a podcast about Disney that I demanded to be on your Captain Marvel episode. And that was probably a year ago. So I'm glad that the day is finally here that I'm getting what I asked for.
Don't let anyone ever say I don't keep a promise. And also joining us on the show today is my friend Amy Fulcher from asthebunnyhops.com. Amy, how you doing?
I'm great. I am so excited to talk Captain Marvel. I told you a little while ago, as soon as I could talk about it, I was on the set and that was embargoed forever. And I am so excited that now we can talk about not only that, but talk about the movie itself now that everybody's had a chance to see it. And yeah, I've been bursting with all this stuff that I need to get out. So this is exciting.
Yeah, I know I said you had a superpower earlier for, going through Gringotts. But honestly, having a superpower of keeping your mouth shut about this stuff for that long is pretty incredible.
Yeah, that was back in April of last year. And it's just now that we were able to say that we were there a few months ago, but it was only this week that we were able to actually talk about what we saw, which was like the longest year of my life ever.
Oh, I'm sure.
I just can't get over the fact that you got to be on set. That's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, it was amazing. And just to be like, again, like totally nerding out, that was also the day that I was on set was the day of the Infinity War premiere.
Oh, wow.
So
wow.
that was, yeah. So we were literally on set in the morning. It was a short day. And then we had to leave because we had to get ready to go to the premiere. Plus, everybody who was on set was getting ready to go to the premiere too.
Oh my
so
gosh.
that was like, Gringotts, and that day too, like two of the top days ever. So
Amy, you live a rough life, I got to tell you.
it is hard. Well, I always say, like, I get to do some really, really cool things, but it adds up to about 12 days of the year that I get to do cool things. And then the other 300 and whatever days are completely and totally boring. And I'm a big loser the rest of the time. But those 12 days, man, they are amazing.
That's one day per month, so you're really making the whole year count.
Exactly. Yeah. Hey, I live my best life, 2 weeks of the year.
All right. Well, so for those that may not have put it together, but we're going to be talking about Captain Marvel today. It just released a few days ago, and I think already it's becoming a cultural phenomenon. Everyone I speak to, movie fans or not, have been talking about this. So first, I guess I want to start off just with some overall thoughts. If you have not seen the movie already, that's okay. We're going to have some non-spoilery talk up front, just some overall thoughts. And then if you have seen it, we will give you a warning. We will go into all the spoilery details because, boy, there are a lot of them.
Also, if you haven't seen it, what are you doing?
This is very true. Stop what you're doing, pause the episode, and go see this movie. But Kaitlin, let's start with you. This movie, I know that you and I have been talking about it for a very long time. It's been anticipated hotly. So leaving the movie theater, what did you feel?
Oh man, that's a that's a deep question because I felt a lot of things. I mean, I had really anticipated this movie, and not because I will say I'm not a lifelong fan of Captain Marvel because I don't think she's been prominent as much as I have lifelong connections to a lot of pieces of Marvel, even outside of the MCU. I've been an X-Men fan for a really long time. I didn't really discover Captain Marvel until I heard she was joining the MCU, and I thought, well, that sounds exciting. I want to know more about her. So I actually got the Marvel Comics app so I could access some Captain Marvel comics and read through them. And so I read through the most recent series involving her. That was incredible. It was really good, and it was just something that I was really excited to kind of meet the character that way. But that series really doesn't go into too much of her origins. It kind of just picks up with her as already being the big deal that she becomes. And so I was excited to see how they were going to do that in the movie and see what they were going to do as far as showing me an origin story of her or where it was going to pick up. And so I'd really anticipated this. I was very excited to see a female-led MCU movie because that's been a very long time coming. It's extremely overdue. And so leaving the theater, I think I just felt that I couldn't believe it had really happened. I'm not ashamed to admit I cried several times during the movie, and not because I found the movie to be sad, just because I was emotional over the fact that it existed and I got to experience that. And so I will say I was blown away by the quality. I thought everything was shot really well. I felt like it was a very well-made movie. I couldn't get over the acting and the performances by everyone. The relationships and the character building I thought were incredible. I was a little taken by surprise because I don't watch movie trailers, so I had a little bit of a different expectation for the plot. So I was kind of taken by surprise by that, but then after kind of thinking it over and talking about it after we left the theater, I really kind of loved the way that they decided to approach it, because an origin story can be kind of boring. Like, I think when it comes to Spider-Man, we've all seen him get bitten by the spider 100 times. So it was good to see the way that they kind of came up with a way to make the origin story a mystery for both you and the main character, as opposed to it being just you watching her unravel her powers. You kind of had to unravel them together, and I grew to really love that narrative, whereas first I was kind of thrown by it.
Yeah, I totally agree. It threw me off as well because you and I, neither of us watch Marvel trailers. We just don't think. I think that it ends up spoiling some stuff, just even shots. Like if I see a cool shot, like, whoa, look at that, person punching another person in the face. Like to me, that ends up spoiling a moment in the movie. So we don't watch trailers at all. So yeah, the structure initially threw me off. I remember the first shot, the way it opens up, I went, oh, that's how we're doing this. Okay, this is not what I expected. Let's buckle up. But yeah, honestly, I'm happy that I got to experience it with you because, yes, audience, she did cry numerous times. And it was, honestly, I cried too. Before the movie even began, but we'll talk more about that in spoilers. Amy, you and I have been talking about this movie for quite a while as well, ever since you had teased that you may have known a little thing here or two there. So what were your thoughts overall on the movie?
Well, I'm going to have to go back now to Ant-Man and the Wasp because when I left that movie with the mid-credit stinger where Fury was using the pager, I immediately was like, oh my God, yes, I can't wait. I am so ready for Captain Marvel. And I don't want to get into, since we're still early, I won't go spoilery on it, but I left this one like, I cannot wait for Endgame. And the big reason for that is I cannot wait to see how Captain Marvel impacts that story.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I left super hyped for that. I will say I didn't cry in the movie. I got a little misty, and again, I'm going to have to hold on to what did that to me because it's a little bit spoilery too. But yeah, it was so powerful. Like, Ant-Man and the Wasp, we got our first female title character, but she had to hold. She was there with a man. And it was just like, I was like, this needed to happen. The MCU needed to have a solo female title character. And just the fact that, now we have one and it's very clear that she's going to be an important part going forward. I just think it's amazing. It's just like, what, it was time, and I'm so excited to see where this all goes.
Yeah. The idea of how important this is for women everywhere. Now, keep in mind, this is a man saying this, so I understand. But as an ally to the feminism movement, it can't be understated how important this is, because obviously Wonder Woman was a big step. And yes, the Wasp, played by Evangeline Lilly, was a very big moment this past July. But as you said, Amy, she had to share the spotlight. So for Marvel to finally bring around honestly, it's about time that we finally have a Marvel movie that stars no one else other than a female character, and one of the most important characters in the MCU moving forward. Because as you said, this is going to be very interesting how Captain Marvel impacts the rest of these characters in this universe. So this is going to be a theme that keeps coming up, I'm sure, throughout the entire conversation. But it was very exciting to see how impactful this is, not only in the movie theater and how they did this on screen, but also culturally. Just seeing what I've seen on Twitter and Facebook and what have you, and Reddit, people are really, really gravitating towards this movie because, well, again, as I said, it's about time.
Well, it's beyond time. I mean, we're 10 years now into the MCU. But I'm glad that when they finally made it happen, they made it happen with such a powerful character. And I gotta say, you mentioned Wonder Woman. I love Wonder Woman. I thought that movie was amazing. But we also have a female character who's the lead, who's fully clothed.
Yes. And I enjoyed Wonder Woman too. I felt it's a DC movie, and I don't want this to be a DC bash podcast, which we've come close to before the last time we talked about Marvel, but they're a little bit all over the place with their plot lines and what they want to convey. And so as much as I loved that movie, and as much as I was excited to see Wonder Woman, that movie wasn't the well put together, I think, female narrative that I had been looking for. I think they did a good job of showing a prominent, strong female character, but they also kind of missed the mark a lot on making what her story should have been about, because she didn't really have other than in the beginning, she didn't really have another female character she played against. She didn't have somebody else to share emotions with that wasn't a man. And so it's not that I don't think there should be a romantic interest in a movie, but it felt like so much of her story ended up being about her romantic interest. And so I think Captain Marvel, the thing that I was the most impressed about was that there was no element of that whatsoever. And it wasn't to make a point. I don't think it was just because that wasn't the story they wanted to tell. Her romantic interests, where if they exist or if they don't, just wasn't part of the story. And I loved seeing them tell that the story that mattered in that moment was the story of her friendship with Maria Rambeau. And I think that's what kind of impacted me about this movie as opposed to Wonder Woman, which, like I said, I did really enjoy Wonder Woman, but I think this one had a little bit more of what I wanted out of a female-led superhero movie.
Yeah, there's been a conversation that Kaitlin and I have been having for a while about, for those of you that don't know, something called the Bechdel Test, which is named after an American cartoonist, Alison Bechdel. It's basically a barometer that you can use for fiction about how does this fiction treat female characters. And Kaitlin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the main crux of this is there a moment in that fiction where two female characters have a conversation independent of anyone else that does not involve a man? Like, it could be plot, it could be just a relationship between the two. But the question is there a moment in your movie, comic book, novel, whatever, TV show that has two female characters speaking to each other that does not involve a man?
Yes, and it's not meant to just be about a romantic interest. It's a man in any context. So even if that's just the main character, if that's a side character, if that's a father figure, husband figure, brother figure, anything like that, it's just meant to be showing that women talk about things that are not men.
Whoa, crazy idea.
And right, and so it's crazy because that sounds like just a simplistic concept that it's crazy that you would even think you need to rate movies on that, but a alarming number of them fail that test. And it's funny because that test is almost not even applicable to Captain Marvel because it just blows it so far out of the water with the relationship that you get to see in that movie that it's not even really worth talking about that test because it's just not even, they didn't even have to worry about that. And it's almost like they didn't even consider, okay, are we passing this? It's like, well, no, the movie was about something that you didn't even need to think about passing it.
Yeah, that was very relieving because we've walked out of a lot of movies where we go, oh, wow, yeah, they really didn't treat that character well. I think this is a much more realistic, as you said, because, whoa, crazy idea that women do this and have conversations about anything else other than men. But my hope is that this is the first movie in a long list of movies that breaks ground and blows beyond that. Hopefully, in years from now, we're not even going to be talking about the Bechdel test, that we don't have to worry about that. But leading up to this point, there were plenty of movies, and still are, that fail that test. So let's talk about, in context of the MCU, and we'll get to spoilers in a minute. How do you feel that this movie fits into where we currently stand? Because we are, 21 movies into this. I think this is the 21st movie in the MCU. Amy, let's start with you. Do you think that this accurately sets up what we should be looking forward to in Endgame? And how do you feel this sets us up, I guess?
Well, it's interesting that we're talking about a movie that was taking place, but primarily in 1995, that is the perfect lead-in to Endgame, which is present day, and yet somehow it works. I loved the fact that we had a flashback movie because we have so many conversations now about the MCU timeline and how for the up until now it was like, well, everything's kind of happening in present day, and then people are like, well, here are all these little details that throw things off. And I kind of like that with this one, we get to kind of throw that out. Forget the timeline. We know when this is happening. It was in the 90s. And yet we know going forward from the stinger in Ant-Man and the Wasp and from what the action was here, we know that Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, is going to have a huge impact in Endgame. The movie had this feel of its own, and I don't know if that was the 90s setting or just how they approached making it, and yet somehow it just seemed to mesh so well with the MCU. It felt like an individual movie. You could have watched that movie without ever having seen another movie in the entire MCU. You would have missed a couple of jokes, but that's it, and yet it just felt so seamless, even with the major time jump of how everything's going to work out.
Oh, I fully agree. This movie just definitely completely had its own tone, and I love that. I love that it just kind of stands on its own. And I think that's kind of how Thor Ragnarok is, maybe Guardians of the Galaxy, that they just completely have their own tone and they're just their own. You could definitely experience those movies without seeing anything else. And yeah, it's kind of almost hard for me to describe what the tone of this movie was because it did just stand alone so well. But I think if you are in the know and part of somebody who's been following and cheering on the MCU for so long, it did give you all of those hits that you wanted of it being, you can see what this is leading up to, and you can see, oh, they are introducing her for a reason because she is the one that is big enough and powerful enough to maybe, hopefully, possibly get us through what is happening in the current day.
It's funny. We were just hanging out with a friend of the show, Jesse Zavada. He was actually on to talk about Horror Nights a couple months ago. We were hanging out with our friend Jesse, and he's doing homework. He's never really watched Marvel movies, but he's been interested. So we've given him some homework to, here's some movies you should watch, and we can watch, Avengers and Civil War together and so on. But it was interesting because this reminded me a lot of Black Panther, in that it is directly related. Black Panther takes place right after Civil War, right? They directly reference the events of Civil War. But honestly, I could tell anybody to watch Black Panther. In fact, Jesse has watched Black Panther and having not seen any other Marvel movies, and it totally makes sense. This is the second, probably only one of the other movies in the MCU where I go in blind. You don't have to see any prerequisite movies to understand and appreciate and enjoy what's happening in front of you. That being said, it's almost like extra credit. Whereas if you've seen the Avengers and you have a familiarity with Coulson and with Nick Fury, then when you see these characters show up, you go, oh my gosh, I have, 4, 5, 6, 7, however many movies of lead up to this. So this is very interesting. The movie right before Endgame, the one movie in the MCU where I go, you have to watch at least 4 movies before seeing Endgame. In contrast, Captain Marvel, anyone that's listening to this that may not be a big Marvel fan, you can go see it right now, and I still think that you're just going to fall in love with this movie. So any final thoughts before we move into spoilers? Because I feel like every time that we're talking about stuff, we're kind of dancing around and being very careful with what we say, and I don't want to hold anyone back for too much longer. Any other thoughts for people that may have not yet seen the movie?
I think my final thought is that if you are listening to this without having seen it, you don't want spoilers, and so maybe you're someone that was on the fence, because I can't imagine why you haven't seen it yet, but if you were someone that's on the fence, there's a lot in this movie for everyone, and I know a lot of what's been framed around it. If you're reading reviews from wherever, you're going to hear about the fact that this movie was important when it comes to feminism. I want people to know that this movie is not about feminism. It didn't center on that. I wouldn't say that, you're getting an overall social justice message from that. And I don't say that to discredit whether or not a movie should be about feminism, because I support that. But I just want people to know, don't feel like this is going to beat you over the head with it. Instead, maybe go in and see that there are things in this movie that are really about the female perspective on life and what it means to be a woman, and and whether that is a powerful woman or a normal woman or anything like that. It's really just, there's so much about this that speaks very deeply to the unique experience of being female. And maybe go into it with that mindset. It's not going to preach to you about feminism, but there are things that if you want to learn from it, you could learn from it. And you don't have to, but you could. And I think that's what it could be. And if maybe it doesn't all ring true for you, then that's okay. It could be that it's just not for you and it doesn't resonate with you. But I promise you that there are a lot of women that this movie does resonate with, and that's why it's so important. Not because it's preachy, but because it does touch on things that are very unique to the female experience.
The same thought with that. I remember reading before, there's been so many negative comments before the movie ever came out from people talking about what Brie Larson has said, about wanting to have a diverse press cover the movie and have diverse reviewers covering the movie. And I think a lot of things just taken way out of context. And I've seen more comments than I ever want to about how this movie is not for white men,
Ugh.
which is not true. Several of the leads in the movie are white males,
Yes.
and the theater that I saw it in was full of white males. And also, saying, I don't want to watch another social justice warrior movie. That's not what it is. I mean, every superhero movie has political elements in it, because that is what superheroes do. They work with they're avoiding wars, causing wars, whatever. There's always political. This is not a social justice movie. It just is a movie that happens to have a female lead. And I to go beyond that, I don't think this is too spoilery to say that there was literally, I think, one little nod to all of the press, which was when the guy was like, "You should smile more," or something like that. That literally is.
Yes.
So if you're like a super conservative and you're just like, this is not for, no. If you like Marvel, if you like the MCU, this is a movie for you.
And, if you're offended by the joke about not telling women to smile more, maybe you should reevaluate how much you're telling women to smile.
That joke in our theater, when that one line came up, as a man, I sat in that room and I went, oh. I could feel the energy in the room of every female going oh, I've heard that too many times in my life to not have a strong emotional reaction to this moment. But, there's a really good Roger Ebert quote where he says that film is a mechanism for empathy. And as a man, let me say, that is a really good quote that comes to mind for this movie, because I'm a man. I have never once walked a day in the life of a woman. I don't know what both of you go through daily. But Kaitlin, as you said, it's not like anything was ever really beating me over the head with any messaging, but it did give me kind of an insight, or a mechanism for empathy to realize, oh yeah, these are some things, like a term that we might bring up later in spoilers, of gaslighting. This is what gaslighting feels like, even though I don't normally, or if ever, experience that. So that was, I think it's a great movie for plenty of people to see, in a very similar vein to Black Panther, where you get a vision into, or just a brief moment into, another person's experience. So yeah, I love it. If you haven't seen it yet, you should definitely go buy a ticket. It is a great addition to the MCU. Or if you are just looking to set your foot into the MCU, this is a great spot, because, I think you probably remember the 90s, and this will bring you back. Well, without further ado, let's jump into spoilers. So again, if you have not seen Captain Marvel and you want to go the unsullied route like Kaitlin and I, please turn off the podcast. Please come back. We'd love for you to join us. But for right now, pause, because we're about to get into spoiler territory. I think that is enough preamble to have everyone scramble to their phones and hit pause. So I guess, where do we even begin with spoilers?
Let's talk about the very beginning of the movie, if we're going to go into spoilers.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too.
The Marvel splash, when that came on,
oh my God,
that the theater was just gasping, and I heard sniffles. I heard full on crying.
Yes.
When it was instead of the traditional, all of the different characters in the MCU, it was all Stan Lee. And then just in case you didn't mention that, they, gave him a thanks before the movie started. It was amazing.
Stan Lee, it's funny, we were at Universal Orlando, like I mentioned earlier, and we went on the Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man, one of my favorite attractions ever. And Stan Lee's in a handful of times, both in the queue and the attraction. And I grew up with Stan Lee. I'm a Marvel kid from way back. And Stan Lee, for the longest time, he's just been a constant in our lives. I think all three of us just have known Stan Lee to be a part of our lives for so long. Since his passing this past December, it's only March now, and it sometimes hits me, and I'm reminded that he's no longer with us. So that one moment, I forgot that this is the first big Marvel Cinematic Universe movie that we were going to see after his passing. And as soon as the first frame of his face pops up, I just grabbed Kaitlin, and it hit us so hard, because, oh yeah, this is real, this is happening, or it happened, and now we're living this. And I think it was such a classy, tasteful way of saying, truly, thank you, Stan, because we wouldn't have half of what we have if it wasn't for him.
No, I agree. I've been sitting here trying to not choke up talking about it because it's still, I think part of it is that he still feels with us. I forget that he's passed, and it's because he's so prominent in all of these characters that we talk about almost daily and think about all the time, and he just still exists in all of that, that it's hard to remember that he is gone, and that is, but he's left us with such a big legacy, and I thought that was such a classy, good way to celebrate that legacy.
It was, yeah. I can't. I called one of my friends the second I left the theater, who I know she gets very emotional in movies, and she's the biggest Marvel fan I know. And I was like, I'm just going to warn you now. I'm not going to give you details. I don't want to give you spoilers. You're going to cry hysterically the second the movie starts. You don't even have to get into the movie. You're going to cry. And of course she did. You know, it was just, it was so well done. And I can't wait to see that on all the, you know, because I'm assuming they're going to do it on Far From Home and Endgame, you know, and they're going to keep that for a while. And
I honestly hope that that is kind of the Marvel logo going forward, that that's what they're going to continue to do, at least for the foreseeable future. And I can see if maybe at some point they'll change it, but I could see that they will continue that tribute for a while.
Well, because if you look at like Endgame, for example, Endgame is clearly going to be like a bookend on 10 years of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, let alone, you know, the almost 100 years of Marvel Comics leading up to it. I would expect that we would see it one more time in Endgame. Plus, I mean, I guess this is probably a good point to talk about Stan Lee cameos before we even get to the real movie. Did you guys enjoy the Stan Lee cameo on the, I guess it was the train, right?
yeah, that might be my favorite Stan Lee cameo ever, because he was playing himself. I mean,
know.
I was like, I cannot wait. Kevin Smith is somebody who gets super emotional about Marvel stuff too. And I remembered watching a video of him where he was like crying hysterically watching the Yondu funeral scene in Guardians 2. And I was just like, okay, all I need out of life right now is to watch Kevin Smith do a video reaction to the Stan Lee cameo in this, as that was his movie. It was him practicing Mallrats. That was amazing.
Yeah.
I loved it.
It was really good. And I kind of get the feeling that her reaction was added after his passing. I think maybe it might have been slightly different, but sort of the way that they focus the camera on her and she gives that nod, I think that was meant to be a recognition of that. So it does seem like that was added after, but it played so well. It was perfect, and just seeing him like that and definitely playing himself, I loved it. I think that's probably my second favorite Stan Lee cameo, my favorite being not Disney associated, but it was in the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse film from back in December. I loved that one too, because it's the reference in it where he says, you know, Spider-Man is a friend of mine, just really gets me.
Yeah, the fact that, as you said, he was playing himself, but also, I agree, Kaitlin, it felt like her reaction, it was all of us. It was us saying goodbye to him. And it felt very similar with Spider-Verse. Spider-Verse, I'm sure they, you know, planned that shot a year ago at least. But since we now know what we know and we've lived what we've lived, it feels, man, does it hit you hard? And I've heard that they have already shot at the bare minimum Endgame, and I think that they may have shot the Far From Home Stan Lee cameo as well. And I think that's very poetic because Spidey has always been Stan Lee's, like, you know, baby. That was like one of his most, you know, crowning achievements. So if his final cameo is Far From Home, I'm bringing Kleenex. Like, I don't see how I'm not going to walk out of that theater, you know, sobbing. But I loved the way that they paid tribute. So let's get into the plot. As Kaitlin had alluded to earlier, the structure of this movie was not what we were expecting, because I expected, I don't know, I guess Top Gun. I expected a very traditional linear structure, but we start off on the planet with all the Kree. This was very jarring to both of us. I think it's safe to say. How did you guys feel about the opening of the film? I guess, like, before we got to Earth.
I think one of the only criticisms, there have been some comic book nerd criticisms, and I say that as somebody who grew up reading comics, where so there was some pretty substantial changes, like the whole origin story is completely different. So, certainly people are going to be critical of that, and I expect that. But the other main criticism that I've heard from people who've seen the film has been they thought the beginning was a little slow. And I did not, and I have to say that I can't go in that totally objectively, because probably where I spent the most time when I was on set was on the Skrull ship.
Oh, wow.
And we got to do a little photo op there, got to walk, and that was a huge practical set when they're like fighting through the aisles and everything. And I believe that was, none of that was green screen. That all existed on a just gigantic practical set. And I think that the Kree ship was what I saw being built while I was there. So it was just, I didn't find it slow. I cannot go into it objectively. I was just like, oh, this is really cool. I saw this stuff. But I can fully admit, like, I thought when she crashed into the Blockbuster video, that's where the movie takes off for sure.
No, I agree. The way it started, honestly, I kind of was getting a little like antsy. Like my knee was just like shaking up and down. I'm like, this is really cool. I, as a comic book nerd, never thought I would see a movie on screen where we're talking about Skrull and Kree. Like, that's just not something I ever thought would exist. And there was a shot early on where they're Vers, or Veers is what they called her. She was on the train with Jude Law's character, and there was like a big billboard that said like, it's been X many days since a Skrull attack. And there was a moment where I went, holy crap, like this, we're really watching this happening. But I had, from the very little I'd known about the movie, I was like, but why are we not on Earth? So I was really antsy for that, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely had the same kind of feeling of disorientation, which maybe was on purpose because she spends a lot of the film being very disoriented. So I think you kind of are immediately put in her shoes, and maybe that's something I've come to kind of understand and respect afterwards. But during it, I did feel really disoriented because I didn't expect to be with the Kree immediately, and we were going to start out in a galaxy far, far away. I didn't expect that, and I didn't expect that they were just going to go straight into the Kree and Skrull war, and we were going to go straight into what the supreme intelligence is of the Kree, and this just started out as a very high sci-fi film, very almost Star Trek, and it was something that was really unanticipated for me. And it's not that I didn't enjoy it, I just was very kind of caught off guard, and I definitely felt that disorientation. But as it continues and you get to that moment once she falls through the blockbuster, that you do kind of catch up with like, okay, now we're in the movie that I thought we were going to be in. But I am glad that they started there, because I like it when Marvel takes risks. I like it when they don't feel like they have to shy away from the super weird out there history that exists within Marvel. The Marvel Comics universe is very out there, and there's lots of crazy things that go on, and it goes all the way into space, and I like it when they don't shy away from that in the movie. So I am glad they did that, but I was kind of disoriented by it at first.
We referenced the blockbuster moment a couple of times, and when she lands in the blockbuster, I did have a moment of going, oh yeah, this is in the 90s. Up until that point, we had been so deep rooted in all of these sci-fi tropes. I was just like, oh wow, yeah, we're like 20 minutes into this movie, and I for a moment forgot that this is a 90s movie. And the only other thing I want to touch on about the aspect that it is very sci-fi, 10 years ago, there's no way Kevin Feige could have gotten this off the ground. I'm sure he would have loved to, but imagine Kevin Feige, the head of the Marvel Studios, going to, I guess, Paramount, as the time was the studio, and saying, hey, we're going to do a movie about two different alien races, and, there's this woman in the center of it who's really powerful, and most of it's going to take place in space. They would have laughed him out of the office. So the fact that now we're in 2019 and the movie hinges on this. Like the movie is, the foundations of the movie are on another planet. That's pretty incredible. I think we've come a very long way in terms of sci-fi nerdiness.
No, for sure. I definitely agree with that. It's a very big jump, and even when you think about kind of the beginnings of Marvel films, like even aside from the MCU, where you look at where they started when it comes to the X-Men movies, so those were kind of the first of the Marvel films that existed, and obviously they're not connected to the MCU, but it was always interesting with those movies. As much as they were a big hit and people loved them, they were still afraid to kind of go full superhero. They didn't want to have them in their traditional costume, so Wolverine isn't wearing his bright yellow spandex, and they even make kind of a joke about it. And, Rogue doesn't have her green and black on, and so you don't see all of those things. And they were still, they were kind of testing the waters of, do audiences want a superhero movie, and are they going to be into that? Maybe we'll just put them all in black flight suits to see how they feel about it. And so I love it when Marvel just really embraces that and goes for it, and they definitely just kind of say, this is what these movies are, and this is what this story is, and we're just going to give it to you the way that it's supposed to be, and we hope you like it.
Yeah, they couldn't have made Captain Marvel 10 years ago. It wouldn't have happened. I think the first Guardians was probably Kevin Feige, proving, no, we can do weird, and people are going to like it. And so they got that out of the way. They do some Doctor Strange, which feels like an acid trip.
Yes.
And then they're like, see, no, people will come. We can do what we want,
Yes.
trust us. And so I as much as I would have loved to have seen Captain Marvel come along, years ago, and how the MCU deserved her before this, I don't know that it could have happened, before they had proven that, we know what we're doing.
Yes.
Give us a couple $100 million and we're going to do a good movie that's going to make you a lot of money. Trust us.
And to think that they had to cut their teeth on selling the idea of a talking raccoon that has a best friend that is a talking tree.
I know, but you're so right. Those movies really were their first test of how weird can we get. And I remember when Guardians of the Galaxy was being marketed and I saw the trailers and I was like, what? They're going to do Rocket Raccoon on the big screen, and they're going to try to sell a raccoon that hangs out with a tree that only says its name like a Pokemon. I was like, that is the craziest thing, and that's never going to work. And then it was so good, and people loved it, and it was just, they were right. And yeah, it's as long as you trust them, but it took them this long to get to the point where they didn't have to just have superheroes not wearing their original costumes, or Tony Stark cool guy, to really get audiences in the door. They said, we can do whatever we want, and people are going to come, and they're going to learn that they like it.
Guardians when the trailers were dropping for that, I was like, I have no desire to see this movie. This looks ridiculous. And I had a very spotty history with Marvel movies before that. I'd seen all of the X-Men and loved them, and of course I had seen Iron Man and I had seen Captain America, but the very first press trip that I ever did that was entertainment based was going to the press junket for Age of Ultron, and we got homework for that, and I had to watch everything in the entire MCU to prepare for that.
You poor thing.
I was like, okay. I was like, I've seen some of these movies. I like them. And that was but I sat down and I watched them all in order. And of course that included Guardians, because Guardians, I think, was the last movie before Ultron. And I was just like, this movie is freaking amazing. This is hilarious. What was that? And then after that, I'm like, I don't care. You could, I'm there for Squirrel Girl. I am there for whatever you want to do, because I trust you. You know what you're doing. And have watched everything the second it came out since then. But yeah, it was, they've proven themselves to me. I'm sure at some point they'll do wrong and disappoint me, but so far so good.
No, I agree. It definitely has taken off. The next thing I kind of wanted to talk about with that opening few scenes, kind of the sequence of the whole time that she spends with the Kree, I was immediately struck by that first interaction of her with, I don't know why I struggle with Jude Law's character's name. I keep just wanting to call him Jude Law. But that first interaction where they're fighting and they're doing kind of the training exercise, and he keeps emphasizing to her to control her emotions and that she'll never be successful until she does that. It was kind of that immediate click for me that I was like, oh, I see where we're going here. I understand the message already. And that was kind of, I developed the skepticism of him being a good guy really early on, because I heard that, oh, control your emotions, push your emotions down. You're not going to be a warrior if you keep feeling too much. I was like, oh, I understand. I don't see how this is not going to be about the ability to reconcile the fact of being told to suppress your emotions, meanwhile knowing that the right thing to do is to embrace and to understand your emotions.
Just quick follow-up. In that same vein, Jude Law's character's name is Yanrog, so I can kind of understand how you, and I've definitely forgot his name quite a few times. I had to look it up through Google. So Jude Law played by Yanrog. No, I agree. That was a very emotional moment early on, but it was telling for me thematically, where I went, I can kind of expect where this might be taken, and I hope they take it there. For a moment, I thought that it might just be a quick throwaway, but clearly later on in the movie, that theme was echoed later on. But let's get to Earth, because, I mean, heck, we're only still in the first 20 minutes of the movie. Let's get to Earth, because this is where a majority of the movie takes place. As we've alluded to before, she drops into Blockbuster in the 90s, and right out of the gate, obviously they start you with Blockbuster, which there's only one left these days, so I'm not sure. Did they shoot it there? Did they recreate it? Well, actually, Amy, you might know, you being on the set and all.
I don't. The one Blockbuster that exists, it's in a ski town, I believe, in Oregon or somewhere thereabouts, and I don't think it does not look the same to me. So I'm pretty sure they just faked that. I will say, it back in the 90s, that was one of my first jobs that I had for a couple of years, was working at a Blockbuster Video. And I can be pedantic as heck. And I was just ready to tear that apart. We're like, that's not what they looked like. That's not. And I mean, apparently they knew that everybody who worked at a Blockbuster Video in the 90s is a huge nerd that was going to tear it apart if it wasn't done right. And it was done right.
Oh, that's so funny. I didn't even really think about that, but that's great. Also, fun fact on a complete side note, the last Blockbuster that exists has a Twitter account that is really funny.
Oh, they must see the writing on the walls, right?
Oh, yeah, no, the whole thing is about them, how they're slowly dying. It's just really, really funny. But they do have a Twitter account. And I don't know if it was started by, an employee, because it is very ironic. I don't think it's an official thing, but you can find the last Blockbuster's Twitter account, and it is very funny.
So as soon as she walks out of the Blockbuster, which was nostalgic, because I remember going to Blockbuster to rent movies and video games, immediately right out of the gate, we're introduced to Coulson and Nick Fury, and oh my God, I am still blown away with this de-aging technology that they've been using over the past few years. It's beyond Uncanny Valley. In years from now, this is gonna be imperceptible. So, for example, I was telling Kaitlin the other day, if you remember 2 years ago, Rogue One came out. And in Rogue One, they had one side character, I would say, that was de-aged from a actor that is no longer alive. And then they had another de-aging for one shot with Carrie Fisher, who was alive at the time. May she rest in peace. But so then they have those two moments, and I remember seeing that movie and going, wow, that's really impressive. Look at that. They managed to do this. Carrie Fisher looks like she's, 27 years old. This is incredible. But there was a little bit of an air of, okay, but I can see the seams, and this is digital, and, this is processed through a computer. As far as I'm concerned, they had a DeLorean, and they got Sam Jackson back from the 90s from Pulp Fiction, and they just put him in this movie. It is cuckoo banana crackers how real he looks.
It was amazing. I mean, it gets better with every movie they do it in. I thought that Michael Douglas's de-aging in Ant-Man and the Wasp was pretty darn good. And this, I mean, I was just like, I can't tell. I've had a couple of friends who have I saw a couple of cracks here and there in it, but I didn't see that. And I think they've got it. My theory on this is that they are combining the power of makeup more with it, because I did get to see Sam on set with his little green dotted face, which is how they get the reference points for the CGI overlay. And I have seen him out of I did press for Incredibles with him as well. So I've kind of seen him, normal makeup and movie makeup. And they had definitely de-aged him with makeup. And I think it's the combination of like doing that, doing some really top-notch makeup effects and then layering the CGI over that's just got it. So it's just pristine now. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I wonder how much that had to do with. So I thought Sam Jackson looked incredible, but the actor who plays Agent Coulson, I kind of had some like reservations for, and I don't know what it was. There were just certain angles on him that just didn't look quite right, and maybe it's because they don't need to use as much makeup on him because he's not quite as much older as Samuel Jackson is. But I found Samuel Jackson to be so much more believable than I found Coulson. Coulson just kind of looked strange to me most of the time. So maybe it has to do with kind of the way that they do the makeup or something to kind of prep them for using the technology to take it further.
That's very interesting that they used a lot of makeup, and that makes total sense because, I mean, if you think about visual effects as a medium, usually they try to do as much as they can practically just as a baseline because, well, that's easier for the eye to understand, but then they augment it with digital. So it makes total sense, but I guess I just never considered that they would do the same thing in regards to makeup. And in reference to your age comment, Kaitlin, Samuel L. Jackson is 70 years old, which he looks, even without de-aging makeup and technology, he looks incredible for 70 years old. Clark Gregg, the actor that plays Agent Coulson, is 56. So there definitely is a bit of a gap in there for sure. So moving on, beyond all the de-aging stuff, and as soon as we leave the blockbuster, there's this really big chase sequence where Captain Marvel is following a Skrull on a train, and then Sam Jackson and Nick Fury, they're driving through traffic in a very exciting car chase. What did you guys think of this action scene?
You guys don't watch trailers, so that we actually had, and I knew right away that was going to be early in the movie because they used a lot of the chase scene and the train in the trailers. So
this is why we don't watch them.
Yeah. So I knew, and so you guys, unless you've watched it since, didn't know when she punches the old lady on the train. That's in the trailer.
Oh, okay.
And there's no context to it whatsoever. And I was just like, okay, so this is for the people who know their comics. And they're going to be like, she's a Skrull. I know what's going on now. And
wow, that's so bizarre for marketing to just to blindly tell people, oh yeah, this superhero that we want you to come pay money to see a movie for, we're gonna punch an old lady in the face.
It was one of those. It's a very much it was a jaw-dropping moment at that point because you see, and of course in the movie you get the context of you see the old lady leaving the train, so you know that the Skrull has adopted her when you see her on the train, has adopted her appearance, and it makes a little bit more sense. Then you do see in the trailer they did show the woman kind of flipping around the bar of the one of the handles in the train, so you're like, okay, she's not just punching an old lady, but it just gets you right immediately when you saw that, like, what's going on? So, but I will say, knowing that they had Skrulls, in that fight scene, they still got me after the crash. When Fury looks over and, that's not Coulson.
Yeah, that definitely got me. And there was a quick moment that I thought there seems to be something off about Coulson, but then I just kind of brushed it off, maybe kind of the same way that Fury probably did. And then all of a sudden they have that moment where Coulson calls, and I was like, oh, right, yeah, it's definitely not Coulson. And yeah, they definitely got me with the Skrulls.
It's funny you say that because I had initially the opposite read. When they get the call from Coulson, I thought it was a moment where the Skrull was late to the party and he was trying to pose as Coulson at the crime scene, saying like, "Hey, boss, I was taking gathering the evidence, and I thought the two of them were going to look at each other and go, oh crap, that's a Skrull." Like, whoa, hang on now. So then for like 0.5 seconds, I thought that, and then immediately, of course, he pulls out the gun and they go at it. But that's interesting that you both, or I guess like you had fallen for that.
So what we're learning is you are too trusting of the Skrull in the car.
This is true. I mean, I probably shouldn't work for S.H.I.E.L.D. The action scene was fun. I enjoyed it. I wish they had done a little bit more with the whole Skrull thing. I mean, on that same point of, shape-shifting, I felt like that could have been a lot more. Like, the Skrull had only shape-shifted, 2 or 3 times? And I think that we could have enjoyed a little bit more of, hold on, this train is full of 60 people. I need to really verify who is who. But there was one really cool shot. I just want to call this out. There was one cool shot that I've never heard anyone really applaud, and it was just so much fun, where the Skrull kind of kicks Captain Marvel or veers off the train, and she's hanging on to the train, and the camera is kind of almost butted up against the train looking at her. So she kind of does a front flip onto the train, and the camera along with her does a front flip. It must be a 1.5 second shot, but man, I remember when they did it, I went, okay, these are the weird things that most action movies don't necessarily try, and they didn't even call much attention to it. But when I saw it, I went, bravo, you guys are having some fun with the camera.
Yeah, I agree. That was really cool. And I'm not super into car chase scenes in most movies. I don't know why. I don't enjoy them. I think maybe because I'm a little motion sick about most things. I just get that really easily. And I think car chase scenes, I have a hard time watching them, so I don't love them. But I did think this one was good. I thought it wasn't too long. I didn't think it went on for too much of the movie, and it kind of conveyed what it needed to convey of her. What I saw out of it wasn't just, there's a chase scene and these are the bad guys and she's the good guy. It was kind of her tenacity of that she kept getting knocked down. She really wasn't doing all that well in the chase, but she kept kind of going after it, and she wasn't going to let them get away and get out of her sight. So I definitely enjoyed it. I thought it was a well done chase scene, even as someone who doesn't enjoy chase scenes. One thing I did want to say, because since while we're on the topic of Skrulls, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit in the timeline of the film, but when we're talking about Skrulls and their shapeshifting, there was a moment later on after she reconnects with Maria Rambeau, and they're inside, and all of a sudden, and the Skrull is there, and he looks like a Skrull as opposed to looking like another character, and then they look outside and see that with her daughter is a Skrull who is shapeshifted to look like Maria Rambeau. And I just love that scene because it gave me the feeling that I get when I watch Signs, that it was just really unsettling and bone-chilling kind of to see, because you don't see them yet as good guys. You see this as the bad guy, and so you get this moment where you see this unsettling thing of somebody is posing as the mother of this little girl, has shapeshifted and is out there with her, basically meant to hold her hostage. And I just got that same bone-chilling feeling you get when the alien walks across the camera at the birthday party at Signs. It was just, I love that moment, and I thought that was a really good use of the shape-shifting ability to show you kind of how sinister that can be, even though we do find that we're kind of on the side of the Skrulls eventually. But in that moment, I was like, ooh, these guys are scary.
Well, great. Now I'm not going to sleep tonight, now that I've got that Signs scene stuck in my head. No, I agree, though. That was, I mean, honestly, that's okay. We can jump around. This is spoiler section. This is where everything gets really lackadaisical. That was a very tense scene, just because, I mean, we don't even really know necessarily how they followed them, but it didn't matter in that moment, because either way, you're like, well, uh-oh. Now we, in their most vulnerable moment, felt even more vulnerable. So as a one final way of showing them in a formidable situation, that was a very useful situation for the shape-shifting. I agree.
Well, it kind of reminds me of, Kaitlin, you were mentioning earlier how the movie kind of is unsettling, I guess, because of the way it jumps around and how they approach telling the origin story, because Carol doesn't know who she is, so you're kind of finding out along with her. And there was this tension the entire movie, partially because of that, because the main character doesn't know what's going on. Certainly, you can certainly have your theories. You don't know what's going on, and there's a lot of question marks and everything. And also that just you never know who is who.
Yes.
Just because there's the overriding, like, literally anybody can be anybody in the movie at any time.
Yeah, it felt so. I mean, you can tell that they were going for a bit of a buddy cop film, which is a bit of a 90s throwback as well, between Nick Fury and Brie Larson. It was very fun to just see them be a buddy cop situation, but in that same way, buddy cop movies, you kind of question everybody. Maybe not necessarily in a sci-fi aspect, but in buddy cop movies, you rely on your buddy, right? Like you can't trust anybody else. So throughout every scene, heck, even when they got to the Pegasus plant, and those security guards come up and kind of just question their ID, even then I'm like, well, I don't trust you. I don't trust you. I don't trust this guy or this girl. Like, everyone's a bit of a target. I don't think that they necessarily pulled that card as much as I expected them to say, oh, yeah, that actually is a Skrull. But the moments that they did certainly did get me.
And it was interesting that they never had anybody that was Fury or Carol.
No.
And I was waiting the whole time. Is anybody, is Carol ever going to be thinking she's with Fury, but it's not really Fury, or vice versa? And but I think that was very purposeful. That they were trying to be very judicious with when they decided to let the shape shifting happen.
Well, and I think they did that whole scene where they kind of answered all these questions about each other so that they would know. So I think they set that up on purpose. So they kind of made it so solid that there's no way that either of them would fall for it, that they just didn't even do it. So I was kind of looking for that too, but I was like, even if they did it, they've both kind of figured out the formula here of how to know that it's not the other one if that were to happen. So I definitely think they did a good job of kind of setting that up and explaining the fact that even if it did happen, it wouldn't last for very long.
It's funny. We're talking about Skrulls, and I think it's worth bringing up in this moment a bit of a gripe I had with the movie. So when the Skrulls aren't people, when they aren't, portraying another character, like Fury's boss, for example, played by Ben Mendelsohn, the makeup itself, I don't know, it felt like it came from a different movie. So the makeup of the Skrulls themselves, it was challenging for me because a lot of these performances, which were all incredible, like, hinged upon Ben Mendelsohn and all these other actors and actresses that had played other Skrulls, I think they were all great performances, but it felt like they, had a hand tied behind their back of this makeup, because I watched their facial expressions and it felt as though they wanted to emote more, but the makeup was kind of restraining them from emoting the way that they necessarily wanted to. So, I mean, the accents that they ended up taking on, I'm not sure if that was an after effect or if that was something planned early on anyway. But there was a small part of me that just went, I'm kind of a little taken out of this because it feels like I'm watching almost like Star Trek The Next Generation or something. It was impressive makeup, but I think it may have been so ambitious that it potentially could have restricted these actors and what they were trying to convey.
Yeah, well, one thing I was fascinated with was how, before we knew much of anything about the movie, Jude Law was listed in a lot of places as Mar-Vell.
Yes, and like to the point where people were convinced that he was Mar-Vell.
Yes, and very early on, I started noticing that they were calling him Star Force Commander, I believe, like on the toys and things like that, and nothing official. And usually, at a minimum, you can get leaks from the toys because people will see the toys in production and they'll share the photos. And I don't necessarily go out of my way to avoid that kind of stuff. And I was like, I don't think he's Mar-Vell. I don't think he's Mar-Vell. And I had one friend who was just like, no, it is 100% Mar-Vell. And that was one moment in the theater I was kind of like, ha. But
love having those moments.
Oh yeah, I have got a really bad habit of liking to be right.
Oh yeah,
more than the average bear, and so I take way too much pleasure in that. It's a huge fault of mine, but I kind of enjoyed that. And I was completely surprised by what they did with Mar-Vell, because we knew Mar-Vell was going to be in the movie. I think that had been established. And the fact that they ended up making it Annette Bening's character totally surprised me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, not following any of the trailers or anything like that, I wasn't really aware of that, but I do I loved Annette Bening, and I think she is a national treasure, and she was fantastic in the movie, but I definitely was kind of following that thread from the beginning of the movie, and like I said, I had my reservations about him immediately because of that whole scene with the control your emotions. And I had my reservations about him, but I was kind of following that thread as, okay, is he supposed to be Marvell? Is that what we're working towards here? And I didn't have any of those like preconceived notions about it. And then it was such a good twist for it to be her. And I loved the twist of, because I was kind of thinking we were going to go down a time traveling loop or something like that when they showed her memories and then they showed her in that photo, I was like, okay, is she gonna go back in time? Because I guess I was just kind of still thinking of Infinity War and the wishing and hoping that we can reverse time, and after what happened in Infinity War, I guess I was just kind of thinking in those terms. So I was still looking for that, and so I kind of got both of those twists. I got the twist of who Marvell was, and that ended up being Annette Bening's character, and then also the twist of that she wasn't actually a Kree. It's not like she was a time-traveling Kree. It was that she was basically the victim of an accident on Earth and obtained these powers through that accident. And so I just loved both of those twists, and I liked the way that it turned out because I think it was both... they did a good job of deceiving the audience in a way that made it entertaining as opposed to just aha, we gotcha. It was more like, well, no, this is kind of part of the story we're trying to tell you.
You know what I can't believe we haven't talked about yet at all? Goose has not come up yet.
I know. What are we doing?
I have failed everyone. I'm so sorry.
It's so funny, even knowing how much Goose was going to play a role in this, I was not prepared for it to be kind of the bond with him and Nick Fury. And gosh, that was so endearing and adorable. I just loved it. And then he ends up being the one that's responsible for the loss of Nick Fury's eye I loved that.
Probably my favorite moment in the whole film was when he said "Mother Flurkin." I was dying at that. It was so funny, and the fact their bond. I have a fun fact about this, you guys. Brie Larson, highly allergic to cats.
Oh no!
Whoa!
Yeah, so every time they did a scene with Goose, they had to like kind of spray her down almost,
from
having an allergic reaction.
Wow! Oh my gosh, that's crazy. I heard there were a few Gooses, right? Like they had like what 4 or 5 different cat actors.
Geese.
I knew that information, and there was definitely multiple cats that they used because they would have the cat that was good for action and the cat that had the really good expressive face, and so they would kind of mix and match the cats as they needed it for filming. Yeah, I think there was 3 or 4. I got to meet Reggie, who was one of the Gooses when I was there. The scene that I was able to that they were shooting the day that I was on the set, and it was a very quick little bit. It's when Fury and Danvers are on the quad jet and they've realized that Goose is on the jet with them, and Goose kind of crawls under her arm and goes up towards the controls. That was what I got to see shot while we were there. So I got to meet, a Goose, which was pretty darn cool. And when they had the flirkin happen, I don't know how to describe that moment. I walked into it knowing, like, I knew that Goose was a fill-in for Chewie, which is the comic cat / flirkin, and I knew what was going to happen, and when it happened, it still kind of was like,
yeah. Same with me. I knew a little bit about, well, as you said, Chewie is the cat's name in the comics. I knew that Chewie wasn't necessarily a cat, and that, he was a flurkin, and I knew that Goose would probably play that same role. I didn't know all of the powers necessarily and exactly what that meant. So it was still very satisfying when his powers really came out to shine. And I totally agree about the Nick Fury thing. I think it's so funny, but also kind of realistic to say this big, bad, macho, tough spy guy, you don't want to know how he lost his eye. The line was, the last time I trusted somebody, I lost an eye. And I think there are so many people that hear that line and go, oh man, he must have like really made some guy real mad in some bar fight or something. Nope. He trusted a cat and maybe a little too much, and that cat got very mad. So I think that is such a good play on the idea that Nick Fury is nothing but a caricature of a, big macho spy guy.
Well, and oh my gosh, and when he was holding the cat as a weapon,
yes.
but the cat knew, he was like, no, these are not the bad guys. I am not going to attack right now. Oh, that was so funny.
Yeah. Also a fun fact about a flurkin and about what Goose is, that kind of a little bit explains or plays into that post-credit scene. An ability that the flurkin have, not only is it just to kind of devour a prey whole like that, they also contain pockets of dimensions. So a kind of running theory of what he did with that tesseract wasn't that he just ate it and it was sitting in his tummy. He stored it away in the pocket of a dimension, and that's why for however long he kept it before he hairballed it back up in that final scene, however much time had passed, it was kind of dormant in a pocket dimension that exists inside of a flurkin.
Kaitlin, this might be one of the many times in which you have out-nerded me very, very skilled. That was pretty great.
I'm very nerdy, too. I out-nerd you with Harry Potter all the time.
Point taken.
There was one thing I had a little bit of a disappointment that I never saw this in the movie, that at the offices for Marvel Studios, they put up a lot of their concept art as wall art. And when I'm not saying like not a framed picture, it's like the full wall is something from a piece of concept art. And when I was there, same trip when I was there for Infinity War, and I got to visit the set, they had one wall. It was near the kitchen in their offices that was a little bit of Captain Marvel concept art. And it was her in her red, blue, and gold uniform out in space. And she had Goose, who at the time we were still calling it Chewie because they never mentioned the name at that point. So we didn't know yet about the name change to be the nod. Instead of being Star Wars, bring everything full circle, it was Top Gun. But they had her, if you've ever seen those little backpacks you can buy that kind of look like a pod with a little round kind of spaceship window in it that you can carry around a cat.
Yes, I've actually seen someone wearing one of those with their cat in it in the mall, and it is the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, she, in the concept art, she was flying around in space with like a backpack on that looked like one of those, except it matched her uniform.
Oh my god!
With the cat in it. It was one of those like big regrets I have because, of course, this was a year before the movie comes out, so we're all there taking pictures and everything is fine. They see us taking pictures of that, and they're like, "Yeah, you're going to need to delete that off your phone right now." So I have no proof of that, but I promise that exists, and it was amazing. And I was like, I wanted to see Chewie in space.
Yes.
Well, I mean, you could always see Chewie in space. Star Wars Episode 9 will be coming out this December. No, oh my gosh. Well, my hope of hopes is that we're going to get a Captain Marvel sequel. If the box office is to be judged in any way, I think that's a pretty safe bet. We're recording this show on Sunday night.
Hey, we don't know what's happening in Endgame, so you can't be too sure.
This is true. This is very true. I do want to talk about Endgame, but before I do, I just want to come up with some brief final thoughts from both of you in terms of the spoiler territory. The only thing I wanted to say before you guys go, I think this movie's remarkable in that from a thematic point of view, it nails every single theme that it should have and could have nailed. it accomplishes so easily what most movies struggle to accomplish. And I mean, we've touched on a few of these things already. Like we talked about how there are strong female relationships that are just purely friendships, just two strong friends that just care deeply about each other. That so many movies struggle to accomplish that, and this movie did so without much effort. Like it did it really, really well. So I think that this movie nails the themes. Like if you think about the very end, when Jude Law's character, I already forgot his name.
Jan Rog.
Jan Rog, yes. When he is saying, "Prove to me that you are, that you can do this without emotion." I'm not a woman, but man, I felt those themes really strong, and they rang home true. So, final thoughts from me, at least. Thematically, this movie is on point.
No, I fully agree. That was kind of the thing that I was the most struck by when I was leaving. And it's kind of what I started out in the non-spoiler section of saying was there's a lot to learn from this movie and to gain from it if you want to. I don't think it beats you over the head. I think it actually is really subtle in the ways that it digs into the female experience. But I loved that strong female relationship and seeing how much they loved and cared for each other as friends, and that was kind of the central love that drove her. That was what sent her to the cosmos. That was what she was doing everything for, was because of this dear, precious friend and her child that was so much a part of her life and basically became her family. And I love the way that was depicted. And I love that they made time and space in the movie to show Maria Rambeau's reaction to losing her friend and to what that meant to her, because they certainly didn't have to do that. That doesn't necessarily drive the plot forward, but it does drive the characters forward and it makes them more meaningful. And I think they resonated harder by them having that moment and what that meant for both of them. And I love that they made space for those things in this movie. And so on that theme of them having those, what her relationship centered on, they were just about friendship, her strong friendship with Maria Rambeau and her strong friendship she develops kind of very quickly with Nick Fury, that they just have this instant friendly chemistry and she grows to care about him so quickly. So I love those, and then I also love the underlying theme of her learning that her emotions make her stronger, not weaker, and when she kind of embraces them, embraces who she is with her emotions, and she rejects what she's been told to be, and who she's been gaslit into believing that she is, and that's when she becomes strong, when she finally rejects all of those things, and she rejects who she was said that her mentor was telling her who she had to be. She believed in this mentor and believed in what he was telling her and that she had to do in order to be strong. And when she rejects that and realizes that he was tying a hand behind her back, and if she lets that hand go and is free, then she's so much stronger than he ever was going to let her be. And I love that theme, and I love the theme of embrace your emotions, don't suppress them, because I think all of us out there as women will have heard and will hear a million times in our lives that we're too emotional, and those emotions will keep you from going far. And I love that this movie shows that that is not true. So I guess that is my final thoughts.
Well, and I gotta say, this movie taught me one thing, and that was how nostalgic I was and how much I needed a 90s movie. I loved all of the attention to detail that the movie had, and kind of the love they put into all these little 90s nods. I loved the soundtrack. I mentioned how I kind of got a little emotional at one point, because I'm usually pretty cold when I'm watching a movie. I have a lot of strong reactions as far as tears or anything typically. But during the fight scene when they were playing "I'm Just a Girl,"
yeah.
That just hit me right in the feels.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is beautiful. I was loving every second of it. So I loved that they found that was the perfect song for that moment. And it's on this one hand, it was kind of, it didn't fit what was happening and yet was such the perfect song. So I think anybody who has any kind of point of reference for the 90s where they can feel that nostalgic, call back for that is going to really love that part of the movie. And again, I'm so excited to see what's going to happen. I cannot wait for Endgame to see how they resolve everything there and the impact that Captain Marvel's going to have in that. I'm also super curious to see going forward. I have been talking for a while now about my theories about, because obviously all of the original Avengers, they're kind of over it. They're ready to move on and do other things and have their occasional cameo. And I've been saying for a while, I really think they're going to be moving into the Young Avengers. And I feel like I feel like, and this is, I will say, because I know you guys don't like spoilers. This is not a spoiler. I have no insider information on this, but I keep seeing these little nods to things that make me think that's going to happen. And the one from this movie is Monica, so Maria's daughter. She's Photon in the comics, and that was Maria's call sign. And so, you know, I have been saying forever, I think they're going to use Cassie Lang as a Young Avenger. Yes. This is completely outside of the comics, but the Stark baby that they've announced is going to be happening.
Oh my gosh.
Since they're saying Pepper Potts is pregnant, I feel like they're going to assign that baby somebody from the comics, and I think we're going to get a whole new cast. But the fact that I really do think that Monica is going to have a role in the future as well. So I don't know that, but I think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I love that. I really hope that's true because I loved her. I thought that she was such a charming little actress. I think she mostly just kind of got to play herself. They found this charming, charismatic kid and said, hey, play a charming, charismatic kid. And she did a great job. I thought she was just such a wonderful, bright spot in the movie. I loved every scene that she was in. So I really hope we get to see more of her.
Yeah, that theory, man, there's a small part of me that hopes that doesn't happen just so that you didn't spoil my experience. But then, of course, 95% of me is like, I need that to exist.
Well, that's part of the problems with spoilers, right? You hear things and you're like, man, I'm really attached to that idea now. And then if it doesn't happen, you're also upset.
Yeah, like I said, it's currently just a theory, no insider information. I keep seeing the little nods, like in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Cassie kept talking about like, I want to be a hero too.
Yeah,
you know?
No, I totally see that.
I 100% seeing them set that up. You know, whether or not it'll happen, I don't know, but I think that they need to bring new people in, so that's one way to do it.
Yeah, I have one more scene I wanted to reference, and I don't know how we managed to gloss over this one, but it's that scene where she's kind of battling towards the end with the Supreme Intelligence, and she goes through that moment where she is reliving all of her moments of her childhood and young adult life of getting back up. And man, did that moment really choke me up. It was just the idea, not only was it about seeing her stand back up in the face of adversity and her realizing that is who she truly is. She's someone who gets back up no matter what happens and she keeps fighting. It was also kind of the reflections too that I think I really identified with of who she was as a kid, because I was a really kind of rough and tumble kid that was out getting myself hurt and doing things that maybe were dangerous that I shouldn't have been doing. And it was just that idea that she, no matter what happened, got back up and kept doing those things and kept taking risks because she knew that was who she was and what she loved doing. And I was just really, really moved by that scene that she gets back up. And that was something actually I'd really looked forward to seeing in the movie, because I had read a quote by the author of the most recent Captain Marvel series, comic book series, and that was the one that I've read. They were interviewing her kind of in preparation for this movie, just as getting an idea of who Captain Marvel is as a character. And there's this quote that I just fell in love with the character even more, and I'm going to use a bad word, Danny, I'm sorry. You can bleep me if you have to.
I can bleep you. I know where you're going with this.
They reference it and they say, they're kind of comparing her to Captain America, and they say that Carol Danvers, no matter how many times she gets knocked down, she gets back up. And that's a character quality she shares with Captain America. I mean, they both always get back up, but they say that Captain America gets back up because it's the right thing to do. Captain Marvel gets back up because you. And I just love that. I love the way that defined her character, and I think that was that moment to show you that she was this kind of rough and tumble, super brave kid, and no matter what happened, she got back up with this kind of hard look on her face that, yeah, I'm going to do that again, and I'm going to keep doing it because that's who I am, and that's who I'm going to be unapologetically.
I got chills just you talking about that scene because I loved it so much in the movie. And I'm sorry, I hate to be like, I feel like I'm a broken record where I keep talking about the trailer, but they showed that in a little bit of that. You got a little taste of that in the trailer, but I didn't know it was going to like actually be that full, huge, beautiful scene in the movie. But there was also a part in the trailer. There's no, it wasn't an accident the movie came out on International Women's Day. And that was very purposeful, and they showed that. But when there's a part in the trailer where they did that too, and then they had it goes to the word hero,
mm-hmm.
but it starts without the O, so it says her.
Oh, cool!
That was just like chills again, and it's just they don't. It's not a beat you over the head feminism movie like we've said, but again, there's thought that's going into all of that, and it was so cool to just see such a badass female superhero kicking ass. It was, and we needed that.
Yeah, I agree. This movie was a movie that women deserved, and it was, and I think men deserve too. I think they need to see that, and I love it. I think all of the messaging and the thematics of it were just right on point, and I'm really, really happy that this movie exists, and I'm happy that it's out there to teach us the things that it set out to teach us.
I'm not sure how much I can add to this. I think both of you are really, really nailing it. So I think that's a really good way to end our review of Captain Marvel. That being said, I think we should spend a couple of minutes, even though we've been going for a while, talking about what to look forward to, because man, we have a very, very powerful character in Captain Marvel, and the very next movie in only, a month and change, a month and a couple of weeks, like 6 weeks, we're going to be getting Avengers Endgame, where Captain Marvel is going to be playing a pivotal role because, y'all, that after credits scene, oh my gosh, chills across my entire body. I could not move out of my seat after that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't even breathe when I was watching that, because it was just, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the moment that we're going to see where they've been and what they're doing, and here they are. And I was so caught off guard. I kind of knew that post, you just knew that post-credit stinger was probably going to involve her receiving that call to come and help. And I thought it was just going to be, you see her get the page and that's it. So the fact that it showed all of them, I just was so blown away, and I can't believe it. And it has me so hyped for Endgame.
Yeah, I loved the scene. I loved both of the scenes in the credits. But yeah, the fact that she just showed up there and was like, "Where's Fury?" I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait. I am so excited. For the longest time, I have had this desire to see Thanos taken down by Nebula.
Yes, much like the comics.
And that's how it happened in the comics. And also, and now I'm torn. I would, if Captain Marvel and Nebula want to like pair up and do it together. Dream world for me. I am all over that.
Yeah, it is very exciting seeing the tone shift because, as we discussed about Captain Marvel, the movie, the tone is very lighthearted for the most part, other than some key emotional beats. And then to shift from that and these very momentous occasions to, wow, it looks like the Avengers are wrecked. They are in dire straits, even just the color tones themselves. The moment that it cuts and you see Captain Marvel's, or I guess Nick Fury's pager for Captain Marvel, it's blues and blacks and grays. It's dark tones. So what was it, 90 seconds, maybe 120 seconds of footage that we got of Endgame, man, this is going to be a dark hour to hour and a half, I think, because I'm just excited to see how they're grappling with the fact that half of not only their friends, but half of the galaxy has dusted.
I have a feeling, in Infinity War, that took place in a 24, 48 hour period or something. It was a very condensed, for a 3-hour movie, it was a very condensed time period they were covering. And my gut is telling me that the action in Endgame is going to be taking place over a very long period of time. And I think I think we're going to get wrung through the emotional ringer for sure before we get to some type of like, okay, now I know what's going on. And I have been saying, I'm going to call it now. I've been saying for a while, I think Captain America's a Skrull. I'm just putting it out there.
Whoa! Whoa! Okay, I bring people on for some hot takes for sure. I think that's the brand of my show, but man, that is a hot take to be sure.
But I honestly, I like to be contrary. I have so many friends that like are obsessed with Captain America. So I think I've decided that's going to happen just to, I was like, he's going to die. And when he does, Skrull. Sorry. And again, that is based on nothing other than that me deciding that's what's going to happen.
And I think that's the way that Marvel really wants it, is they want all of us on podcasts and the internet and elsewhere all just guessing right now, because they have given us basically nothing to go off of with this movie. Even for someone like us that doesn't watch trailers, like my understanding from the trailer itself that has been released of Endgame, there's not a lot. It's just a bunch of like, oh, this is a dark shot. He looks sad. She looks sad. They all look kind of scared. So I'll be curious. We're only a month and change away, and we still don't have a second trailer for Endgame. If the second one shows a lot, I mean, it sounds like they're going to be keeping their cards pretty close to their chest on this one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it very. Of course, I've seen it, and it doesn't show much. Now, I have the tiniest bit of information about Endgame. I'm not going to tell you about it, because I know you'd like be like, click, hang up right now.
If you have anywhere you posted about it, Danny can link to it in the show notes for those that would like to know that.
Well, I haven't. I haven't been able to actually post about that. Just a little. When I was couple of years ago when I went to Pinewood to the set of Ant-Man and the Wasp, and just for funsies while we were there they took us on the Endgame set.
Oh
too.
Wow.
And they weren't actively shooting on the set that we were on, and like I couldn't even take my phone in with me, or I would have been taking notes, because I was like reading. We were on the set that was like the lab, so at the HQ, and it was the lab and like kind of their lounge area and some other stuff. And I saw some Post-it notes that were like very interesting, that I was trying so hard to commit to memory, because I was like, this is telling a lot of stuff, but I my memory was only so good. So I've got this like tiny little bit of information that who knows what it pans out in the great scheme of the movie and everything, but it's like burning a hole inside of me to come out.
So Amy, what you're telling me is that I should have you back on in about, let's say, 7 weeks or so.
Absolutely. I'm here. Yes.
Well, this has been a blast. I absolutely love this movie. I want to see it again. I think, Kaitlin, you could probably agree with that we'll probably make it to the theater again. So, needless to say, if you, for some reason, sat through the spoilers and have yet to see the movie, go see the movie. You're still going to love it. Well, Kaitlin, thank you again. You and Corey are going to have to do some sort of, like, I don't know, ring fighting here, because you have been on the show 3 times now. Thank you so much for joining me again.
Yeah, you're welcome. I was happy to. And just as kind of my signing off note, I'm going to end with a quote. There's a really wonderful interview on Vanity Fair that was done by one of my favorite pop culture critics and commentators, Joanna Robinson. She did an interview with Lashana Lynch, who played Maria Rambeau in the movie, and I just wanted to kind of end this with a quote from her. She says, Lashana Lynch says in her interview that women are superheroes just by being born. And I think that's great, and I really wanted to recommend that interview if you want to kind of read more about, from her perspective, the relationship between her and Carol Danvers, and what that was like to film, and what it meant to be part of that relationship, and why she thinks it's important. It's a really, really beautiful interview. It's on Vanity Fair by Joanna Robinson. I'll make sure Danny links to it in the show notes. But women are superheroes just by being born.
I will definitely link to that for sure, because now I want to read that too. Amy, I've been looking forward to this episode for a while. I've yet to have you on, but clearly I'm going to have you on again, because I love how much we've already nerded out in the brief time that we've had together. Thank you so much for joining. Where can people find you, Amy?
Okay, I am... my website is asthebunnyhops.com. I am As the Bunny Hops on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. Keep it simple.
I will put all of that in the show notes. So if you guys are looking to follow Amy more, I can also put Kaitlin's handle for Instagram.
If you want to see pictures of Disney World and food, primarily, maybe some pictures of what Danny looks like, you can follow me on Instagram.
I'll throw it all in the show notes. Both of you, thank you so much.